You can all go ahead and grab your seats.
Well, good morning. Welcome once again to Community Christian Church. My name is Nick. I am really glad to be up here today. I get a chance to speak here at CCC every now and then. I'm actually not on staff here at CCC. I was for about 7 years. I was on staff here, but for the last 11 years, I actually own my own counseling practice. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and so I spend my days sitting across from people, sitting across from individuals and couples and families, and try to help them be as healthy as possible. That's kind of my day job. So I'm a local kid, grew up right down the road in Hamilton. My family were members here at CCC. So my wife, we've been married for about 19 years, a little over 19 years. 3 kids that we chased all over the world, particularly in the fall. You know how that works. One thing you should know about me is I love the fall. Love the fall. Now my birthday's in the fall, so I think when you're growing up, that makes you a little bit more likely to make that your favorite season. But I love like hoodie weather. I love when it's cold enough to wear a hoodie, but not so cold you need a parka. Like I like that in between. Like I'm not a huge fan when it gets freezing cold. Love like football season. It'll be okay, guys. It'll be okay. 3 games. It'll be okay. We'll hang in there. We're going to make it. I like pumpkin spice coffee, and I'm not going to apologize for it, okay? Like you're not going to make me feel embarrassed. I enjoy a good pumpkin spice latte. One of the things is, as a dad, I take very seriously passing along dad jokes, okay? Like it is a rite of passage. If you're not a dad yet, if you're a young dad, like you'll get there, but it's an important part of fatherhood. So I thought, as a way of warming up this morning, the way a pumpkin spice latte might warm you up, I figured to warm up this morning, we might have some autumn dad jokes just to get the wheels moving a little bit, right? So for example, what do you get when you divide the circumference of a pumpkin by its diameter? It's pumpkin pie, right? Pumpkin pie. Yep. How about this? Why is it so hard to beat a pumpkin in a boxing match? It never lets its gourd down. Side note, dad jokes, the best response for the person giving the joke is small chuckle and groan, okay? Like that's what we're going for, okay? Like that's the sweet spot for us. All right, why did the scarecrow win an award? He was outstanding in his field. I have a visual dad joke for you. These are rare. Visual dad jokes. All right, what's this here? It's coming. That's Humpty Dumpty having a great fall. That's great. I mean, come on, that's fantastic. Well, it is great to be able to be together on this autumn morning. You can feel the chill just starting to creep into the air a little bit. It is fantastic to be together. We're in the midst of a series where over the last couple of weeks, the messages have been about this balance point between fear and faith. I mean, what does it mean for us to live in faith and by faith and through faith, even in the midst of fear? Whether it's the fear in our individual lives, whether it's the fear the world kind of seems soaked in sometimes. And it's such an interesting and pressing question because all of us have to grapple with that sense of uncertainty or that sense of fear. And what does that mean for our faith? What does that mean when we experience fear and we're trying to follow after God or we're trying to be faithful to Jesus? And there's one specific verse we're going to kind of zoom in on a little bit. And it's a verse I'm going to guess a lot of us have heard before. Whether you've been around church or not, this is one of those verses that you kind of hear every now and then. And I think it seems really straightforward, but there's a little bit more going on. And so we're going to kind of unpack that this morning. It's going to be in Philippians 4. This is what we read. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Now, as a therapist, I spend a lot of my days talking about anxiety. Anxiety is something I talk about all the time. And it's something that all of us wrestle with in different ways. And I don't know, maybe more now than ever, right? So we're so connected and we're so informed and modern life is so sophisticated in so many ways. But man, I don't know if we've ever had more intense anxieties in our world and how we experience it. Now, of course, this is not a counseling session. You don't normally do counseling with 300 of your closest friends, but what I am hoping is that this is a chance where we can be really helpful to unpack a little bit more of understanding what anxiety is and how it tends to work. And what does it mean for people who are attempting to be faithful to God? As we get rolling, I want to clarify a little bit of terminology, though, because there's some words that we use interchangeably, and I think we need to be careful not to use them interchangeably, and they're the words fear and anxiety. I think we have to kind of separate these words out just a little bit, because if we mix these up, I think sometimes it can lead to some confusion. I think sometimes it can lead people to, kind of feeling maybe embarrassed or shamed in some ways, and so let's make sure we're talking about the same thing in the same way, right? So fear is just a basic human emotional response to danger. And if we're being honest, it's a really helpful emotional response because it keeps us alive, right? Like fear keeps us from doing a belly flop from the fourth story or eating the potato salad that's been in the sun for 9 hours or, I don't know, petting the tiger at the zoo, right? I mean, like fear keeps us from entering into situations of danger without realizing it. It's just a normal human response. Anxiety is when we have a fear response without a fear stimulus, okay? So it's your body's responding like it's in danger when it's not directly in danger. If a tiger walked into the room, you would not have anxiety. You would have fear because you may actually be in danger. Anxiety is when your body has a fear response about what work's going to be like tomorrow, or whether you're going to get that promotion in 3 weeks, or whether someone's going to call you back that you're hoping will. And here's the tricky part, is your body, my body, it doesn't do a great job of distinguishing between the two. So when a tiger walks into the room, our body's going to have a very similar reaction to when I'm stressed about work tomorrow. Physiologically, you're going to have a lot of the exact same experiences. Increased heart rate, increased breathing rate, increased blood pressure, slower digestion, right? Dilated pupils, muscle tension, adrenaline, like your body clicks into those things, whether you're physically in danger or whether you're not. Now, look, this doesn't mean this happens in the same way for everybody. It doesn't mean that there's not different trigger points for different people when it comes to that. And there are some people who experience anxiety in such a frequent way or in such an intense way that it impacts their life every day. But there's some people who might be predisposed to kind of having that overcharged, anxious kind of feeling. And whether it's your genetics, whether it's your life experience, I genuinely hope that if you find yourself wrestling with anxiety in a significant way, that you take a next step. Whatever the next step might be for you, whether it's finding someone to talk to, whether it's talking to see if there's like a medical option that makes a lot of sense for you. But if you find yourself on that more extreme end of anxiety, make sure you respond to that because that can be debilitating if you don't keep an eye on it. Now, this distinction between fear and anxiety, one of the reasons why I think it really matters that we clarify that is because when the Bible instructs us in this verse that we're looking at to not be anxious, I think it's not telling us to not feel fear. It's not telling us to not have any uncertainty. It's not telling us that we should never be uncomfortable. What it's trying to do is it's trying to point out what anxiety is. Now, this portion of the Bible is written in Greek, and in Greek, the translation from Greek to English is imperfect sometimes. And the word that we're looking at here that's in Greek is merimnao. Merimnao. That's the word that they're using here for, and sometimes it's fear, anxiety, cares, worry. That's different ways that it's translated kind of throughout the Bible. But one of the things Greek does, which is really interesting, is Greek will often take two words and it'll just like mash them together to make another word. And it carries a different kind of meaning sometimes. So here's the two words that are getting mashed together here. One word is merezo, and one word is nous. Merezo means to divide or to separate or to pull apart. Nous means mind. So when it says this idea of anxiety, what it's talking about is your mind being pulled apart. Your mind getting pulled in different directions. It's this almost this internal dynamic of kind of getting pulled apart. My guess is, I mean, it's kind of an evocative image, but my guess is some of us know exactly what that feels like. I mean, that might be a real accurate way of describing anxiety for a lot of people is that internal dynamic of just feeling like pulled in different directions. It's this almost internal tug of war. It's this internal pressure. When we talk about this idea of anxiety, we're not talking about the emotional reaction of fear. We're not talking about a concern. We're not talking about a worry. We're talking about that kind of consuming nature of anxiety that tempts us into a place where we are being pulled in different directions. We even use some of this kind of language in our life today. We'll talk about someone like coming apart at the seams or it feels like you're going to pieces. One thing I hope that we can all realize is anxiety is a universal human experience. Again, different people may have it to different extents. They may have different intensities. They may have different frequencies. All of us experience anxiety. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how educated you are. You will experience anxiety. And this might not seem to jive completely with this passage that says, do not, having this idea of how do we respond to anxiety in light of our faith. What this is talking about is that this is not about the experience of anxiety. It's about the response to anxiety. Right? Anxiety has this stuckness that it tempts us to. It tempts us to get stuck in a spot. And part of what this verse is really talking about is what does it look like to respond appropriately in the face of that experience. Now, one of the challenges with anxiety is it impacts our decision making. It impacts how we see ourselves, it impacts how we see our world, it can impact how we see God, and so because of that, it impacts how we make our choices. And I'm going to be painting with a very broad brush here, but in general, there's two main responses that people have when they're experiencing anxiety. By the way, these are not mutually exclusive. You can do both of these. But one response that people frequently have in the experience of anxiety is distraction. They distract themselves. I think this is understandable, right? Like you're experiencing something that's unpleasant. You're experiencing something that feels negative. I don't really want to look at that. And so I'm going to distract myself away from it. And if we're being perfectly honest, I think people who are Christians or trying to follow after God, I think sometimes we might be even more tempted to turn a blind eye to these things because we don't want to look at it. Right? So there's a verse that says, don't be anxious. I feel anxious. Well, maybe I shouldn't. So I'm just going to pretend like I'm not. Like I'm just going to not look at it. It's like when you ask your kid to clean their room and they come back and the rug is all bumpy and their closet's all full, right? It's like, I'm just going to not look at it, right? Like I'm just going to cover it up. Maybe if I just pretend it's not there, it's the exact same thing of it actually not being there. But pretending what we're experiencing or what we should be experiencing doesn't put ourselves in a position to respond. If I'm feeling sad or lonely or angry or anxious, but I don't want to look at it, I want to turn a blind eye to it, I want to distract myself away from it, I will never be able to respond. We do not address problems we cannot see. We don't address problems that we don't have the ability to understand. Like, we have to put ourselves in a position where we can respond. And man, distraction is such an easy trap to fall into. When I don't want to feel something, I just kind of ignore it. And if I may step on my soapbox for just a minute, I think this is one of the reasons why our phones can be so dangerous. Our devices are dangerous because we carry distraction with us all the time. And look, I am all for rest. I'm all for recuperation. I'm all for recovering. I'm all for getting yourself to the space where you feel like re-energized. But let's be perfectly honest. A lot of what we're doing is not resting. It's distraction or disengagement. It's one of the reasons why it's so... When was the last time you sat on your phone and scrolled for an hour and a half and got up feeling really refreshed? It doesn't happen, does it? And here's one of the tricky parts is we convince ourselves that we're resting because we're doing it in a restful posture. We're reclining on the couch or we're like kind of, leaning back. Like we do it restfully. And we say that we're resting. We say that, I'm going to rest for a little while. I'm going to unplug for a little while. Except it's not restful. It's often disengagement. We're not often engaged with what we're doing. We're disengaging from our lives. We're muting the very experiences that we're going through. Look, I'm not anti-technology. I'm not anti-phone. Our phones are powerful things. We can do amazing things with them. It's like a power tool. But like any power tool, if you misuse it, you're going to hurt yourself. If you don't know how to use a table saw, and you decide to use a table saw, and you do it poorly, you're going to hurt yourself. Your phone is a power tool. So I hope that you will use it wisely. Look, the challenging is not that we want to relax, but in the seeking of that, when we instead settle for disengagement and distraction, it's shutting down our brains, it's muting our emotions, it's distracting ourselves away from something that might actually help us get an eye on what we're experiencing, particularly if we're experiencing anxiety. This deeply uncomfortable experience that we have to learn to respond to. What happens over and over again is that we struggle to develop the sort of self-awareness that is required to know what we're experiencing. And let's be honest, Self-awareness is not knocking anyone's socks off as far as the next step, okay? Like, no one's going to go home and write a real exciting book about self-awareness. But if you don't know what's going on inside of you, who's gonna? If you don't know what you're thinking, if you don't know what you're feeling, how in the world could you know how to respond? And again, the Bible talks over and over and over and over again about the value of self-awareness. Right? Just a handful of verses, right? Ephesians 5. Be careful then how you live, not as wise as unwise, right? So be careful with how you live. Examine yourself to see if you are in the faith. That's 2 Corinthians. 1 Timothy, keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching, right? There's an examination of ourselves that we are invited to over and over again. Well, why? Because if I do not grow in self-awareness, how can I know what next step to take? I cannot address issues I refuse to see. I cannot respond to challenges I refuse to look at. What happens is, though, so many of us are tempted to just kind of bottle this up and seal it up and just bury that all down and then cover with a bunch of distractions. And that'll work for a while. The hard part is humans are really bad storage vessels. We leak. Anything you bury will leak. Maybe not immediately. It might take some time. It might not even leak exactly how you expect it to. It might leak in a different area than where you even stored it. But everything you bury will leak. And so I guess maybe the challenge for us is to figure out, what does it look like to develop that level of self-awareness? It's almost like self-honesty, right? Can you ask yourself honestly, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I experiencing here? As opposed to distracting away from it. Maybe one of the challenges, maybe a little mini challenge for you. Maybe the next week, try this out. Every time you eat a meal, every time you feed your body, check in on the rest of your body. How's my emotions doing? How have my ups and downs been? What am I thinking? What am I experiencing? Where's my anxiety levels here? Where do I feel kind of pulled in different directions? Just check in on yourself. Even if you're not sure what to do with it, do you even know what's there? How can you respond if you don't know? Now, a second common response when people experience anxiety is to reach for control. Just reach for control. Don't nudge each other. That's not polite. Right? Anxiety, by definition, makes us feel unsafe. And so we are tempted into positions where we'll exert control over our world in an attempt to feel safe. Again, I think this is understandable. I feel unsafe. I do things and control things and manage things in such a way that makes me feel a little bit safer. And so sometimes we put control over our environments or over the people in our world. Sometimes we're tempted to try to control things that are uncontrollable, and we know it. Except here's the reality, is it doesn't work. I think we all know it doesn't work. But I think we get that if we exert pressure in parts of our world, that, man, that level of control, it's just an illusion. But sometimes we settle for the illusion because it feels better than the lack of safety that sometimes comes with anxiety. There are undoubtedly people in here today whose relationships have experienced the stress and strain of one person managing their anxiety through control. And people can sometimes reach for this control even if they don't mean to. It's almost like they need to have a level of impact in their world to help turn down the volume of their anxiety, regardless of how it impacts their family or their coworkers or themselves, because the illusion of safety is more comfortable than the discomfort of anxiety. Some of you know exactly what that's like. So what do we do? What do we do, right? So this anxiety is a common human experience. We're all going to have it. And we are tempted to either distract ourselves away from seeing it or try to reach for control over things as a way of responding to it. So what do we do? All right, so jumping back into Philippians 4 here. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. One of the things you'll notice here is that what we are challenged to do is to offer prayer and petition. These are active steps. These are not passive steps. It doesn't say, do not be anxious, just try really hard. It doesn't say, do not be anxious, wish away whatever you're feeling. There's actionable steps of prayer and petition. So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, how well am I doing with the things that are mine to work on? My actionable steps, the steps that I get some say over, how well am I doing on those things? We believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing, ever-present God. And yet it's an interesting dynamic that when you read through the Bible, that God does not just snap his fingers and make things happen. He works in and through and alongside of people Over and 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 over. God works through and alongside and inside of people. How did God free the Israelites from slavery in Egypt? He sent a person. How did the message of Jesus get spread around the world? He sent people. The Bible was not magic papers that floated down from a cloud. People wrote it, inspired by God. It was written by people, and God worked through those people. He always has. Could God snap his fingers and make our anxiety go away? Yeah, I think he probably could. But the example we see over and over again is God wants to work alongside of us and through us and in us. He wants to work in concert with people, not in spite of them. And so this verse suggests that we bring our anxiety before God through prayer and petition with a heart of thankfulness. Right? Actionable steps. This isn't wishing, this isn't hoping, these are actionable steps. You see, when we pray, we are entering into the presence of God. That is the goal of prayer, is to enter into the presence of God, to further into a relationship with God. When you pray, do you think God is unaware of your situation? Like, was he like napping and you need to fill him in? It's like, oh man, I didn't realize it was that hard for you. God knows. He doesn't need you to spill the tea. Like, he knows what's going on. Then why pray? Why petition God with our concerns? Because it brings us into the very presence of God in a way that allows us to connect with God in a way that can be beneficial in what it means to deal with our anxieties. Look, I've spoken to people before who are deeply anxious about, finding a job. Man, they really struggle to apply for jobs. I've talked to people before who are really anxious about their health. They don't want to go to a doctor. I've talked to people before who are stressed out about their relationships, and they will refuse to read a book or take a next step. It's amazing how often people can, without meaning to, just kind of envision, I'm sure if God wants it to happen, he'll just do it, without recognizing that God invites us into work alongside of him. There's actionable next steps that we have to own. And look, there's lots of ways that people can bring themselves into the presence of God. There's lots of ways that people can pray. It's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of deal here. Right? For some people, they really, a walk in the woods that is quiet and away from people and away from, it puts them in a presence where they can pray or engage with God in ways that nothing else would. For some people, music does that. Or for some people, music becomes like the words of their prayers. Some people, they will write or they'll journal, and it becomes almost this written, ongoing prayer to God. What do you do to bring yourself into the presence of God when you feel that pulled apart dynamic in yourself? Right? The question becomes, are there actionable steps that God has placed into your hands that you need to do in the midst of this experience? So the question we have to ask is, how well am I doing with what's placed in my hands? Second question along the way is, how well am I releasing to God the things I can't control and never could? Right? How well am I doing with the things in my hands? How well am I releasing the things that should not be in my hands and never should have been? There are things that we know are out of our control. If I gave you a true-false test about things you can control, you'd all score 100%. Can you control the weather? No. Can you control other people's driving, no matter how much you yell? No. Can you control what someone else thinks? Can you control if your kids stay healthy? No, you can't. You can say yes all you want. You can't. You wish, I wish, we can't. Can you control if someone betrays you? Nah. What happens is, I think intellectually we get this. You'd always get 100%. You get it. And yet emotionally it kicks like a mule, doesn't it? Man, intellectually we get those things we can't control. But man, when it gets down to it, when the rubber hits the road, it is so hard to release those things. In 1 Peter, God invites us to cast all our anxieties on him because he cares for you. We're told to release, right? Cast our anxieties on God. When I was a little kid, my parents signed me up for a bowling league. I don't know why, looking back on it. I don't know if I asked for it, if they thought it was a good idea. I was probably 8 or 9, and they signed me up for a bowling league. And the way this bowling league worked was your first week, and these are all brand new bowling kids, your first week made your baseline. Then every week after that, they compared how well you did each week to your first week. And that first week, I don't know what happened. I don't know if I was touched by an angel. I did so amazingly well. I was killing it that first week. So every week after that was a deep disappointment, right? Because I never came close to that number again. Every week is 60 less than the first week again, right? Every week was a deep disappointment. And so I stink at bowling. I've always stunk at bowling. I still stink at bowling. Now, I do know a couple things about bowling, okay? These are deep insights into bowling. One thing I know about bowling is you have to let go of the ball, okay? This is something I've learned. Yep, deep analysis here. You have to let go of the ball. If you try to bowl and you don't let go of the ball, you'll just be standing somewhere with weird shoes holding a ball, right? That's not actually bowling. You'll just be holding the ball. Now, you might be thinking, man, I don't know if I can risk letting go of this ball. If I let go of this ball, I don't know, who knows where it's going to go. But you're welcome to stand there holding the ball, but let's be honest, you don't let go of the ball, nothing happens. There's nothing that goes on from there. There's no next step after that one. Second thing I learned about bowling, again, deep insights here. Once you let go of the ball, you have no control of what happens next. Have you ever done the body English thing where you're like, oh, where it's like, you're like, come on, and this is not unique to bowling. There's lots of sports where people will do this, where it's like you're trying to physically manifest some kind of control over a thing that is nowhere near you and you have absolutely no control over. What happens is, we know this is obvious for bowling. If you don't let go of the ball, nothing happens. Once you let go of the ball, it has to stay released. What would happen in bowling if you rolled the ball and then sprinted down the lane to catch it halfway? You should try that. You should get that on video. Actually, now that I think about it, we get this in all kinds of parts of our world, that when we release a thing, it has to stay released. When it comes to anxieties in your world, when it comes to the anxieties of your life, are you releasing to God? And when you're released, are you letting it stay released? And this creates a duality, right? So there's this dynamic of, I have to do a really great job with what's being placed in my hands. I have to release things that they're not mine. They're bigger than me. I have to release things to God. And it creates this tension, right? But look, the reality we see over and over and over again in our world and in our lives and in the Bible is that the statement, God did it and I did it, are not contradictory. They overlap in all kinds of places. We get these tangled. And what a lot of us do, whether we want to admit it or not, is we spend a whole lot of energy on what we cannot control, which means we have a whole lot less energy on what we could. So let's imagine that there's a guy and he's in a really tough work situation, real stressful place. Boss is not very kind, unrealistic expectations. All the coworkers are kind of out for themselves, kind of like a dog-eat-dog kind of world, not a real great place to work. He's just trying to provide for his family, but this work situation is just eating him up. And he gets so anxious about it and worked up about it. What's going to happen? What's going to be said? And he almost has to give himself a pep talk to go in the morning. Can this guy control what his boss says? Can he control what his coworkers think? Can he decide whether or not he gets the promotion regardless of how hard he works? No, man, he doesn't have any control over that stuff. Now, let's say the same guy, he used to be in a small group with a group of friends that really mattered to him, but given how he's been feeling recently, he hasn't been showing up to that. And he used to run. Running used to be something he was really big into, but he hasn't been out there in a while. Him and his brother, they used to get together every couple weeks and they'd talk and hang out. Sometimes they'd talk about light stuff and sometimes they'd talk about heavy stuff. They haven't been meeting in a while. Does he have control over those things? I would argue he does. What happens is every ounce of energy he spends on what he cannot control will be one less ounce of energy he has to spend on what he could. And so even when he wants to respond, he is sabotaging himself against that response. We got to get this stuff straight. We got to get these things sorted. But maybe the challenge for us is that we have to create a little bit more clarity in ourselves about what are the things that I'm trying to control that I need to release? What are the things that I'm releasing that I might need to exert a little bit more effort into? Maybe you need to get a sheet of paper and you draw a line right down the middle. And on one side is the things that are mine. And you ask, how am I doing? How am I doing with the things that are mine? On the other side, it's the things that are God's. How am I doing releasing? Because when we get these things messed up, when we get these things mixed in our world, man, it's exhausting. You'll spin your wheels, and for what? So maybe that's a challenge for you. Maybe you have to be challenged to develop some self-awareness. Maybe there's a part of you that you're just not paying attention to, you'd rather just distract yourself away from it. Maybe you need to pay attention to areas where you might be tempted to exert control, no matter how it influences the people around you. Maybe you need to ask some real hard questions of yourself about what you can and cannot control and where you're putting your energy. Now, this verse also talks about one more thing I want to make sure we're drawing our attention to, right? Philippians 4, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. So what posture are we called to have? Thanksgiving and gratitude. You see, anxiety is a tricky thing because anxiety tempts us to look forward or tempts us to look back. And anxiety will tempt us to look back on things that have happened, or that thing I said, or that mistake I made, or oh, I can't believe I embarrassed myself. Like it tempts us to look backwards. Or anxiety will tempt us to look forward. Oh, that thing that might happen, or that fear that could come true, or that worst case scenario that I have trouble turning off in my head. What anxiety doesn't do is right now. Anxiety doesn't tend to do a real good job with addressing right now. Right now is the place for gratitude. The right now moments, man, that's the moments where gratitude and thankfulness does its best work. I wonder what it would look like for you guys to literally count your blessings. What would it look like when you feel your mind pull apart to create enough time and space and energy and breath to count what you think are blessings in your life? That you think are ways that, there's good things here. And maybe at some point this helps avoid the temptation of getting pulled back into a mistake or pulled forward into an unknown, but instead focusing on the things that you're grateful for in God. I actually think communion is a really interesting example of this. If you get a little communion packet, pull that out for me. Grab that out and hold it in your hand for me. If you didn't grab one, there'll be some time in a second. You can grab one now. There'll be a quiet moment in a second when you grab one. Grab that out for me. Hold that in your hand. Give that a little rattle. It's an interesting kind of living example of what I think we're talking about here. Right, so in communion, what we're remembering is there was this time in the life of Jesus where he shared a meal with his followers. And he told his followers that he was going to be giving up his life for them so that they could have eternal life. So he said his body was broken for them, his blood was spilled for them, and so we eat a piece of bread and we drink some juice to remember the body and blood of Jesus that was given up for us so we could be forgiven, so we could have new life, so that we could enter into the family of God. And so this gift, you have no control over. You couldn't do this. You could not make this happen. This is gift from God. And yet, God will not magically make this appear in your mouth. Right? You got a choice to make. You're holding this little plastic cup. You have a choice to make, don't you? You have a choice to make about how are you going to engage in this moment. What does it mean for you? Are you going to eat the bread and drink the juice? Is it going to be a significant and meaningful moment for you to engage with God? See, because God, he seems really resistant to kicking down people's door and making them do things. He invites them into it. Communion is an invitation. And communion is actually known by a bunch of different names. One of the names it's sometimes called is Eucharist. I don't know if you've ever heard of Eucharist before. That word Eucharist literally means thanksgiving. Right? There's a reason why communion has always been marked with this idea of thankfulness. And so here we have a living example of things you cannot control, an invitation for things you can control, all under the realm of thanksgiving. This is a living example of what all of us are being invited into. So we're going to create a little bit of time here. It's going to be a little bit quieter. It's going to be a little bit dimmer. You're going to have a chance to figure out what are you going to do to engage with the gift of God. And you have a choice to make about how you want to respond to that. But let's take some time now and let's celebrate communion together.